Protectors of the Grid, Chapter 58. The caterers were ready. The tables under the gaily striped tents were laden with gourmet sandwiches, perfectly ripe fruits, and assorted cool drinks when the buses pulled into the Symbiosis parking lot around noon. The first of the two luxury coaches carried the people with the purse strings and their attendants, a handful of blasé reporters, and the key mouthpieces for Cybershark, Ben and Charlie. Will and Tara kept to themselves in the rear, watching. The second coach held all the other people who worked at Cybershark, everyone from Georgia in accounting to Jedediah, the janitor. No one was at HQ in San Diego today except some temporary security guards. Patty was already there, clipboard in hand, getting hoarser by the minute, but alert and fully in charge. Ben was listening closely to Angus McGowan, patriarch of McGowan and Associates and his biggest investor. As they disembarked, Ben patted her shoulder as he passed. "Good job, Patty, thanks." "You are an ace, Patty, thanks," Charlie agreed, while Tara and Will gave her smiles and thumbs up as they passed amongst the members of the money delegations, the Webb Capital Group, Atlas Investments, and Brain Trust Capital Ventures. So many faces we don't know. It made her skin crawl. Patty grinned and pointed to the crimson-striped tent with rainbow bouquets of helium-filled balloons floating beneath the top canvas. "Over there, folks, that's the VIP tent. Go on over and get something to eat and drink. Ray over there is the bartender. He has all the mixings. Mr. McGowan, we found your favorite single malt scotch for this occasion." Angus' eyes lit up. "You found a bunad, Patty? Atta girl, if you ever get bored working for this young punk." He elbowed Ben in the ribs. "Come see me. I'll have a place for you at McGowan and Associates." Patty grinned and waved him on. It wasn't the first time he'd propositioned her, and most likely wouldn't be the last. She winked and blew him a kiss as she turned to keep the flock moving into their respective pens. The worker bees were crowding around the same sumptuous spread for lunch, but their libations were limited to beer and wine, with the exception of anyone working on the dress rehearsal this afternoon. Patty hurried to the blue-striped tent and whispered to the head server, "Harriet, please make sure everyone with the green key on their name tag has a clear head." Harriet nodded. "I know, Patty. This is at least the 20th time you've reminded me. No alcohol for the green keys." The young man on the podium under the green-striped tent plugged in a connector, and the microphone shrieked until he hurriedly twisted a dial. The sound of his finger, tap, 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 notified everyone the sound system was now live. He stood and held out the mic to Patty, who hopped onto the podium. "Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us on this momentous occasion. Ben, do you want to say a few words?" Ben shook his head and shouted, "Later." Patty nodded. "Okay then, enjoy everyone. We have," she looked at her watch, "an hour till showtime, so eat, drink, and be merry. We'll let you know when it's time to move inside." Tara and Will were circulating through the crowd under the VIP tent. "Damn, Tara." Will leaned over to whisper his complaint. "There are more reporters here than investors. It's going to be impossible to keep tabs on everyone." Tara had a sinking feeling in her stomach. "I'm afraid you're right, Will." She noted several mobile news vans, bristling with radar and assorted antennas, that had pulled in beside the buses and were now unloading their equipment. As she watched, one of the on-camera personalities emerged, brushing her hair, and looked around for someone to interview. Tara grabbed Will's arm and pointed. He looked, nodded, and they eased carefully in the opposite direction, out of the throng and into the foyer of the gigantic building. "Phew, I don't know how they do it, schmoozing those money guys," Tara declared. "It would drive me crazy," Will agreed, "not to mention dealing with the media." They looked around the foyer and spotted a sign with the Cybershark logo and the words, "Follow the yellow brick road." An arrow pointed down to a 6-inch strip of yellow tape on the floor. They looked at each other, then followed the tape into the dim light of the hall. It seemed they were walking into darkness until a bank of lights flashed on in the section of the hall they were just entering. Tara started. "Motion sensors," Will whispered into the empty tunnel. "Sensors, sensors, sensors." The sound circled around them and vanished into the darkness ahead. They started to walk again, the sound of their footsteps echoing more loudly as they left the hubbub behind. The rubber soles of Tara's lace-up boots made only a slight slapping sound on the slick tiles, but the thump of Will's prosthesis alternated with the swish of his moccasin in an eerie pattern as he walked. Thump swish, thump swish. The hall seemed to go on forever, lights behind them switching off as lights in front of them switched on. They had turned a corner, still following the yellow strip, when Will grabbed Tara's arm and laid a finger across his lips. She stopped, her eyes questioning, and heard the same sound he had. Leather soles slapping tile. Footsteps. Someone else, not just someone, too, hurrying down the hall they had just left. Will looked around quickly then, positioned himself right at the edge of the light as it went out. Tara slid into place beside him just as the dark settled in, making the sound of approaching footsteps louder, more menacing. Moments before she expected the lights to explode, she closed her eyes so as not to be blinded by the sudden glare. When the footsteps reached the corner, the lights flicked on and she heard a gasp of surprise. 2 men stood at the edge of illumination. The tall one stepped back out of the light into the shadows. The second man looked back at him, then stepped forward. "Oh my God, are you a sumo wrestler?" Tara felt a stab of fear as he edged forward in a slight crouch. She acted reflexively. "Excuse me, but no one is allowed back here yet." She stepped boldly forward, watching his eyes shift between her and Will, not sure where to focus. She leaned forward to look at the badge pinned to the lapel of the cheap suit that strained across his massive arms and chest. "Ah, you're with the Chronicle. Like hell you are. We'll be sure you get some great photos and some great quotes to go with them." The man still hadn't spoken. "Do you even speak English?" She watched the narrow slits of his slant eyes slide back and forth between her and Will, and was careful to stay just outside his reach. Movement from the shadows caught her eye as the taller man stepped forward into the light, saying something in a guttural language she didn't recognize. Mr. Muscle paused and waited. Tara spoke again. "Hello, did you hear? You can't come back here yet. We will let everyone know and bring you all back here when the demonstration is ready." Tara started and stared when the tall man spoke. "Do you want to see our press passes? We were invited. Why do I not believe you?" "What is it about you?" She couldn't quite put her finger on it. "I understand, Misse." She looked at his badge. "Montgomery, that is not the issue." She felt Will step up beside her, also just out of reach of either man. "You heard what the lady said." Will spoke quietly but firmly. Neither of them saw it coming. Will grunted as a massive shoulder slammed into his belly, knocking the wind out of him as he was lifted, carried by momentum, and slammed against the wall behind them. Will grunted a second time as a beefy fist plowed into his belly. Then he slumped, gasping, to the floor. Tara ran to his side, using her own body as a shield. "Stop! Stop it!" she screamed in an attempt to stop the foot that was pulled back from plowing into Will's prostrate form. She heard more words in the same guttural language, and the big man stopped and stepped back. She looked up to see the tall man step forward to stand beside her, smirking at Will still gasping on the tiles. "Your mighty warrior ain't so tough now, is he?" he gloated. Something clicked for Tara, and her eyes widened. She thought fast. "Why did you do that? What the hell are you thinking?" Tara pretended not to know the man standing threateningly close. When his right hand moved suddenly and a 6-inch blade flashed, she shrank back. "I'm thinking I've had enough of you interfering," he growled and nodded to Mr. Muscle, who stepped forward with a roll of duct tape. She crouched to bolt, but he pressed the point of the blade against Will's neck. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Watching droplets of Will's blood ooze from the point of the knife, Tara stopped resisting as Mr. Muscle wound the sticky silver tape around her wrists and ankles. She watched him do the same to Will, then hoist him over his shoulder, looking to the tall man for instructions. The tall man leaned over and hefted Tara to his shoulder, then nodded toward the dark end of the hall. With her hands fastened behind her, the bones of his shoulder pressed painfully into her belly. She could only see the floor tiles and the tall man's heels as he carried her toward the next section of darkness. "Will?" She could hear the other set of footsteps in front of them, and Will's ragged breathing. They continued down the interminable hall until they reached a door. The tall man said something in the guttural language. then tossed Tara like a sack of potatoes on the floor beside the door to a janitor's closet. Will grunted as he too hit the floor. The door opened, they were maneuvered into the space already crowded with a wringer bucket and several mops, and the door closed. As footsteps faded away down the hall, the silence was as complete as the darkness.